In this video, I'm going to talk about binge eating disorder, bulimia nervosa, and the DSM-5. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so you never miss a video. And if you want to speak with me, there is a link below. And if you want to do my 14-day challenge, Junk Food Domination, there is also a link below. You can get started today. The DSM-5, or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, it's that big clunky book that they have in libraries. Nobody ever buys it. But it contains all of the diagnostic criteria for all of these different mental health disorders, and that includes eating disorders. And they updated this back in 2014 or 2015, whenever, and that was the DSM-5 transitioning from the DSM-4. DSM-4 was published, I think, back in the early 90s, so it was definitely time for an upgrade. In this video, I'm going to explain what the DSM-5 does differently from the DSM-4, and if that really matters. The first thing they did was they separated EDNOS from eating disorders not otherwise stated into two different categories. You had unspecified eating disorders, which I'm not even sure what that includes, and then they had OSFED, so other specified feeding and eating disorders. So that includes atypical anorexia, and then limited duration or low frequency bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorder. I think one of the good things they did was they actually describe binge eating disorder as an actual eating disorder. Before that, it was in EDNOS, and a lot of people were getting diagnosed with EDNOS, and it just turned into this, I don't know, this garbage can. If you didn't know how to diagnose them, you just gave them EDNOS. But binge eating disorder wasn't its own eating disorder, which is crazy because that's probably the most popular one. It's probably far more pervasive than, say, anorexia or bulimia, because it affects a lot of adults. The thing about binge eating disorder is that it affects people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whereas anorexia nervosa, you typically see that in younger ages. I don't want to fall into stereotypes here, but usually it's younger females, not always, some men get it too, 20s, 30s, but then after that it tapers. Same thing with bulimia nervosa, you see that in teens, 20s, 30s. You don't see it much in later life. Binge eating disorder is different. That develops at any age. You have like 5 and 6 year olds now with binge eating disorder. It's crazy. That's not typical, but you start seeing this in high school when you have mass media, and then you have social pressure, cultural ideals, and this all compels young men and women, kind of like me, to aspire to some sort of ideal body. I've talked about this before, so I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but all of those forces can make somebody engage in unusual behavior like dieting, which then triggers survival urges, which then leads to binge eating disorder, and then the person gets fatter and gets the exact opposite result that they wanted in the first place. Anyway, there's unspecified feeding eating disorder, and then there's OSFED. I don't know why they use words like atypical and low frequency and limited duration. It's like you either have it or you don't. You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. Why have these descriptor terms like limited duration? And then how did they define what limited duration is, or what is low frequency, and why does that even matter? If you binge eat once a month, is that acceptable to you? I don't think most people would find that acceptable. I don't want to do that once a month. I don't want to do it ever again. To me, you're either recovered or you're not. And I don't want to know that at any one day I could have this massive eruption. I want to know that I'm recovered and that I'm recovered for good. So words like atypical, whatever that means, don't really help me. I don't think they help other people. The question to ask is, do we need a DSM? As soon as these big manuals and books are published, they're immediately out of date. That's the problem with textbooks, is that it takes a lot of time to publish it. You have to have peer review. You have to have this committee. Publishing the DSM-5 probably took many, many years. And by the time they published it, it was already out of date. We have new research all the time. We have apps like UpToDate, which helps medical professionals stay up to date and get the latest information. We have Cochrane reviews. We have online access to all of these journals. Research is changing all the time, and I don't think we need this big manual to be published every 5 or 10 years with updated diagnostic criteria. It doesn't help, and it doesn't help the people who have it. How does it help us that we have a bunch of academics come together and say, These are going to be the criteria. These are going to be the definition. For example, in order to be diagnosed with binge eating disorder, you have to have 1 episode a week for 13 weeks. Question is, why 1 episode for 13 weeks? Why not 2 weeks? Why not 3 weeks? Why not 4 weeks? How did they decide on 13 weeks? To me, the DSM seems so arbitrary. They come up with these words like atypical and limited duration, and they put people in these categories. Why does it matter what category you're in? Why does it matter what descriptor that you have? Why does it matter that you meet certain criteria that a bunch of academics agreed on? From the perspective of the people who are suffering, it doesn't matter. All they know is they have a problem and they want the problem fixed. And I think we waste a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of ink coming up with these specific criteria. We don't need to put people into categories, and we don't need to come up with a diagnosis. All that matters is that there's a problem and the problem needs to be fixed. It's the same with bulimia nervosa. If you have 1 episode a week for 13 weeks, you're diagnosed with it. Well, what if you get to 12 weeks and then you skip a week and then you have another episode? Does it have to be 13 consecutive weeks? If you're binging and purging or binging and compensating, all you know is that something's wrong. Doesn't matter. Does that mean that you have to wait 13 weeks to seek help? And why does it matter if you get a specific diagnosis anyway? If you're going to say, well, insurance won't pay for it, well, the truth is, it doesn't matter if insurance pays for it. If you have a problem, you're going to fix it. That's what my clients do for me. They pay me to fix their problems. We don't wait for a diagnosis and an insurance claim. We don't have time to do that. We need to get the problem fixed now. So fix it. I say this, stop publishing DSMs. They're big clunky books. I don't think the DSM will last another generation. I would be shocked if they publish anything beyond DSM 6, because research is changing so fast. We have so much information and it takes so much time to publish these things and to update them. And then you publish it and it's already out of date. Why don't we just update our information on a daily or weekly basis? We don't need to get together every 5 or 10 years and decide on these We don't need academics to get together every 5 or 10 years and come up with these different diagnostic codes. They don't help. So let's talk about what binge eating is. I have several descriptors for binge eating, and if you have binge eating disorder, you probably know that you already have it, but I've identified 5 things to describe somebody that has binge eating disorder. There are 5 hallmarks or 5 common behaviors associated with binge eating disorder. The first one is eating rapidly. When you're a binge eater, you're not slowing down and you're not conscious of what you're eating. That's what's kind of funny about it. So you think you need all this food, and then when you eat it, you're not conscious of what you're doing. You're not tasting it. You're not absorbing the flavor. I mean, you're absorbing it, but you're not really enjoying what you're eating. You just have this primordial urge to consume as much as you can, and you're eating it really fast, and you're eating multiple things at a time, and it's like this 30-minute storm, and when it's over, there's an empty bag of chips and there's an empty carton of ice cream, and you're thinking, what the hell have I just done? The other hallmark is a sense of urgency. You feel like you have to do this. It's all you can think about. You know what it feels like. You have this drive, this obsession, this focus. You have to get your hands on all this food as fast as you can. You can't focus on anything else. You're looking forward to this binge and you can't wait. And you're driving to the grocery store or the gas station or the fast food restaurant or whatever, and it's like you can't get there fast enough. Binge eaters usually eat alone. I've never binged in front of other people. I've had a lot of food in front of other people. I'm going to call it a binge. It was like an overeating episode, and people didn't notice that I was eating that. Not only that, but I was in my 20s. I was a male. People thought, oh, that's just, what bachelors eat. They eat a lot because they don't know how to cook, and so when they have good food available, they like to eat a lot of it. So nobody ever suspected it was a problem, but binge eaters eat alone because it's disgusting, it's shameful. They don't want others to see them. They don't want others to know that they're doing that. And that's kind of the problem, is if they suffer in silence. They have this problem, but they're so ashamed of it that they don't want other people to know. Binge eaters always eat beyond fullness. Remember, binge eating is an eating disorder. You're not eating based off of hunger. You're eating to satisfy an urge, to satisfy a craving. You're not eating because you're addicted to food or you love food or that you're just a glutton. None of that is true. You're eating it because you have this urge, you have this craving, and you have to eat it as fast as you can in the largest quantity that you can. So after a binge, you feel like crap, you feel bloated. Sometimes I felt so bloated, so large that I couldn't lie down in bed. I literally had to walk back and forth for an hour just so I could digest some of it. But my stomach was so distended that I couldn't find a comfortable position to sleep in. That's bad. Finally, there's feelings of shame and guilt after a binge. It feels terrible. You feel like you're a failure. You feel like you can't do anything right. You can't feed yourself. I remember thinking to myself, why can I not do the most basic thing? Feeding yourself. Something that you learn when you're 2. And now I'm 25, 30, and I can't even do this on my own. Like, what the hell? Why can I not do this? Why can I not feed myself in proper portions? What's so hard about eating normally? Those were the thoughts that were going through my head. Then let's talk about bulimia. Bulimia is closely associated with binge eating disorder. Really, the difference between bulimia and binge eating disorder is that binge eating disorder lacks the compensatory behaviors. So when I was bulimic, I purged, and if I couldn't do that, I at least tried to purge. Toothbrushes were my favorite. If I couldn't do that, then I would do laxatives, and then I most definitely did exercise or some sort of fasting. So I wouldn't eat for several days sometimes, or I would go to the gym and spend 2 or 3 hours on the Stairmaster. I would take a whole, remember the X-Lax chocolate? It was like this bar of laxatives. It was like a chocolate bar with senna, like sinusoids in it, or whatever ingredient they used, and I would eat the whole thing. You're only supposed to eat 2 of those little squares, and I would eat the whole thing. It was kind of like the final dessert of my whole binge. Like, oh, chocolate bar, and it has laxative. Oh, this will get rid of everything. That's what bulimics do. They try to get rid of it. They try to compensate for it. Because what happens is they get these urges and these cravings, and they think, oh my gosh, I have to get all this food, and then they consume it, and then they think, oh my gosh, that was a mistake. I regret it. I didn't mean to do that. That's like the rational brain coming back on board. It's saying, whoa, we've had a big problem here. We need to fix it immediately. It's a rational attempt to fix the damage, to repair the damage as fast as possible. Compensatory behaviors make sense because you're trying to restore your previous condition. You're trying to find homeostasis. You're trying to correct something. You recognize that you've done something wrong, and now you're trying to fix it as fast as you can. Now, purging and vomiting and laxative abuse, those aren't healthy behaviors, but it makes sense if you think about it. Binge eaters, on the other hand, they consume it all, they feel bad about it, but they don't necessarily do something to compensate for it. So that's the difference between bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorder. Ultimately, I don't think any of this really matters. I don't think diagnostic codes or criteria or descriptors or atypical or limited duration, I don't think it matters. People who have the problem have the problem. They need to get help. They need to get the problem fixed. I'm not against psychologists. I'm actually in favor of psychologists. I think they do a lot of interesting work, and they produce a lot of literature and books that I find are really interesting. Psychology has never been a more exciting field. So if you're thinking about going into psychology, do it. Just make sure you have a unique take and you have a specific interest. And don't be just a psychologist who has this practice and sees one client at a time. You can do so much more. If you are a psychologist, you can start a YouTube channel. You can start writing books. You can be a speaker. There is so much demand for psychology research and psychology insight. What I am saying about psychology is that it wastes too much time writing these big books and these big manuals that ultimately don't help anybody. How else would you describe binge eating disorder and bulimia nervosa? Let me know in the comments below. Hope you found this video educational and entertaining. Remember, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to speak with me, there is a link below. If you liked this video, I'm sure you'll like one of the other videos that you see on the screen. Click one of them, and I'll see you there.